as you go on your poetry journeys, you're going to meet all kinds of people. And some of them, if you're willing to really, work on those relationships with people, find out what other people are kind of doing, and also figuring out, there may be ways that they can help you out as well. These are sorts of things that I think could be helpful to consider. I think that I don't want to approach this from like a transactional perspective. It's not like you do this for me, you get this. Like that's not the goal. I think I want to discuss more about, hey, these are sorts of people that you may encounter the longer you're in the poetry game, and these may be. Sorry, my internet's been spiking. Sorry, guys, spiking internet. These are relationships that I think that over time you can look back on and be like, oh wow, like this actually turned out like this person was really able to help me grow in so many ways. That's what we're going to talk about.
Let's talk about it, man.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
So I thought maybe what we could do is kind of just take.
You gotta say what your
Oh,
name is. Who
all
are
right,
you?
all right, fine, fine. Good
It's
morning,
his
guys.
first
It's good morning, guys. Good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to the Versus Live. This is your weekly poetry show, typically around Tuesdays, 9:30, 9:45 p.m. We're here to talk all things poetry to guide you in this process. There is me. Hello, my name is Jeff.
I'm Matthias.
And again, we're going to be talking about today people we're going to meet and things like that. We're going to be talking not like specifically naming people like I was telling Matthias, it's not like we're going to name like Joe, you got to meet Joe. Joe's going to be the guy that helps you out. It's not about that. It's more about.
You sound like you came back from the future. Like you gotta meet Joe.
Joe.
Please get Joe.
You didn't talk to Joe yet? 20 years. It's more about the people that it may have opportunities that you can take, it may really benefit you, if it's something that you're willing to work at. I think from I'm gonna interested. If this keeps spiking, I may have to restart. We're gonna battle with the internet a little bit, guys. If this keeps spiking, I may restart. See if that helps. First person I would really consider, just from someone that's interested in doing a lot of like live shows and things like that, I think developing a relationship with a venue can be really, really helpful. We've been really fortunate with the Verses that in terms of like our open mics and shows that, if we need a venue with a certain cost or things like that, and like some assistance in terms of the things that could be provided, we're very fortunate that we have people that we could turn to run an event much cheaper than if we had to just completely start cold, like booking events at places and things like that. So that's the first thing I would say.
Yeah, I think kind of along those lines, as far as like kind of developing relationships with venues, I think about like and probably this probably goes for all of the examples that we'll talk about today, right? But I think that like because venues and by extension venue like runners, like the people that run the venues, a lot of times they are also watching and have seen like poetry as an event, kind of happen either in their venue, or they, because of their occupation, they have to observe kind of what's happening in the area and things like that. So a lot of times they're really good barometers for what things work or what things haven't worked. Like you might be a better pulse as far as community is concerned, to have them as community for kind of what they offer just intellectually, just what they're bringing to the table when it comes to their experience.
Yeah, and I think different venues have different vibes. So, for instance, we're coming to you guys from Columbus. For instance, we had a show that was run. We dedicated a show. This was a while ago to voices that immigrated to the U.S. or so voices that immigrated to the U.S. or that who are like first generation or second generation writers and things like that. And so we were able to find like a coffee shop who the owners had immigrated to the US and things like that, so like finding, venues and lean into a focus of your show. So for instance, if you're doing a lot of faith-based poetry or something like that, places that have connections either to churches or like cafes that have like a mission like related to like kind of religious sort of work or like recovery or like battling injustice or things like that. These are all things I think could be really helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, and plus, like, I think it also works both ways for venues too, because if you're doing shows, especially like for maybe smaller venues or venues that I might restart the connection if that's okay.
Should we start?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
All right, guys, hold up. We're gonna be back in about 2-3 minutes, continuing this discussion. There's another point I want to make just about developing relationships with venues that I think will be helpful. If you, while we're away, just for like 2 minutes, give us 2 minutes. If you want to write down sorts of people that you think can be helpful on a poet's journey, write us down. We'll see your list in a moment. We will be back.
Facts are important, but like emotional truth that
Yeah.
poets get at is the most exciting and like maybe the most truthful.
When I read it in this space, when I bring it to this audience, why do I want to do that today, here, now? Something I think I'm doing a lot in my work is giving a certain amount to be able to see where this boat is going and where the waters are taking it, but not trying to paint the full landscape. Not only because I don't want to share it, but because I don't know if even I want to go there yet myself. So I'm wondering how you handle that, and if it's scary at any points for you, or how you deal with that scariness.
Yeah. Well, first, so do you feel that way about Cruel Cruel?
God, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
a very common reflection I get from my work is, people are like, I don't know exactly what's going on, but I feel a lot of things. And that's kind of a lot of just my passion in art. Like, I don't
Yeah.
always want to know exactly what's going on, but when I apply it personally,
Yeah.
then I'm willing to approach what I'm willing to approach in the manner of which, or the manner and depth in which I'm willing to go into it,
Yeah.
And we talked about this too, it's a long game of poetry, right? Things I'm tapping into now with Cruel Cruel, I surely will keep writing about, and surely I hope that, not that I'll reveal more, but that I'll discover more. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I asked because I feel like I recognize that in the book, but there was an intentionality behind it. I'm thinking of a specific moment that I marked. This stood out to me when I was reading. You said, I offer a puzzle that will madden you, but your ego feeds differently. I liked that itself as an offering of the text as a puzzle and as an offering, because I think even if there is distance that you're feeling and some fears about sort of, is this text going far enough? I don't know. I think there's something useful in that navigation, and then you being honest about that navigation on the page. Right? I think poetry is exciting because it's poets thinking about how do we approximate different truths on the page. And I think poetry can do that in a way that no other genre can. The reason I stray away from nonfiction when I do stray away from it is because facts are important, but like emotional truth that poets get at is the most exciting and like maybe the most truthful. But yeah, so for my manuscript for my book, it's called Bad Forecast. And it's about, it like circles around a tornado that was in my hometown in 2011. It was a very deadly, historic storm that the story and the narrative was picked up by the national news that entire summer. I was home that summer. My family's house was fine, but my aunt lost her home. Friends lost their homes, and one of my really close friends was killed. And I think I started writing that manuscript just because it felt sort of inescapable to write. I don't feel like I was particularly brave in approaching it. I think I think the sort of fractured, disheveled, tornadic feelings, if you will, that I was feeling about sort of the weather and the world that could contain something so kind of grim. All of that thinking was just showing up on the page in this like lyric or fractured way. And it's a book a lot about adolescence too, and coming out and race relations in Missouri. So there's like an emotional valence to it that is is a bit younger, and that like let me be. I think that let me express my fears as they are, and it helps me sort of be unafraid to do that because I could.
All right, we're back. We're hoping that
No,
round
we did
two
it.
is a little smoother than round one, so we'll find out. So again, we talked about venues. Just want to highlight one other thing about venues too, is that developing those relationships with venues can also be helpful from a perspective of you may be able to bring in people that normally wouldn't even find the venue or normally wouldn't consider going to the venue.
Yeah.
I know talking with from Cave, there was a poet, D Cole, shout out to D, who has her own like studio and things, and she started an open mic at like a place, and she was able to start bringing in a pretty considerable crowd, and they're like, we should probably actually start paying you because you're bringing us a lot of business we normally wouldn't get, so it's not just like a one sided thing. It's something that really can benefit everybody in the right situation. Just
Yeah.
to note.
And I think a lot of times with that, when it comes to like venues, and I guess maybe this might be a second one. Yeah, I'll go with another point. But when it comes to like being able to be in communication with venue owners, a lot of times they have experience with getting things that you might need kind of in the future as well, because a lot of times they might have experience with getting like supplies, maybe like catering and things like that for certain events that even if it's not facilitated at their venue, because they own a venue, they have experience in like having to kind of acquire those things. So I mean, yeah, it's just, there's an exchange that happens there as well, because naturally the poetry community, if you have a following or if you know how to get people into a venue, like a venue owner is always going to view that as an asset.
Yeah. Before we get to, I know you're about to mention a second thing, but Sierra had a quick point I just wanted
Shout
to
out to
address. Sierra saying people understand poetry is essential. Oh, we want to talk about that. I typically get nervous sharing my poems with someone for their opinion because I don't want them to just say, "Oh, that's good." Like I like, that's such a big thing in the poetry. Finding people who actually look at your work for the work itself and not just because you made it. It's so important. Um, People just saying that's good, but not really saying about what part is good.
Yeah.
Why is it good? You know,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
try those people who avoid those just kind of general like good bad statements and more pointing out the specifics. If you find those people, you want to hang on to them.
And actually, I was going to kind of go into my point, or the one that I wanted to bring up, which is finding the. Oh wow, they're really going off.
Yeah, they are.
Finding your community of writers that challenge you, and I think that's like one of the things that was really important to me when I was like a poet when I first became like a poet on the community scene, was when I came into a community of people that, yeah, I mean, it's exactly what Sierra is saying. There's a lot of times where you'll go to a show and the if people that are saying like, oh, that was a good poem, okay, that was cool, I really like your poem. A lot of times it's happening just because, not because those people are insufficient at being able to talk about your poem, it's just that they're not invested in maybe in necessarily talking about your poem, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, you can't really be, no matter how engaged or how much each of us love poems or anything like that, you can't be that engaged with every single person, right? And so I think what I've seen be helpful in spaces is just asking like directly. So I think there's like one edge of it that's like, your community will find you and you'll find them, and that's great. Like I'm not against that whatsoever. But if you really appreciate, then I would do this. I would recommend doing this with somebody whose work that you like in this space. Just like, if you having a conversation with them maybe about their work, as well as, asking, hey, if you have the time, or if you have the energy, or, something of that nature, hey, would you mind maybe giving me some kind of direct feedback about my work? Maybe we could talk about my work. I just want to, grow and get better and things like that. I want to be clear though, don't pester them, right? So the sweet spot is, making the request and then being okay with I don't have that in my time, I don't have that in my schedule or anything like that, or being okay with a little bit further on the line, I'll give you an email or something like that. But yeah, those people that are going to be in the community that are going to actually challenge you, sometimes you ask directly for them, sometimes they come to you kind of organically.
Yeah. Yeah, the idea of, I almost think like when you ask that sort of question, just you're never assuming the answer about like whether or not they're going to be open to help and things like that. And somebody's even going in just kind of assuming, I'm going to ask. I'm going to assume that they're too busy, but I'm going to ask just because why not,
Yeah.
Also, having a relationship with that person is also really helpful. I think that another person I think is actually really helpful to take to like have a relationship with in your poetry journey is, and this goes along with the theory that we'll talk more about at the end, but taking on someone who is kind of a step, how do I put this, someone who's in a position that you were in maybe like a year ago or like 2 years ago, because one, that gives you an opportunity to, I think, kind of formulate your own process for moving forward. Because when you take on that role of like guide or helper or teacher, however you want to view it or whatever the situation takes on, I think you start developing a stronger sense of your own understanding of the situation and ways to grow. And it also, I mean, it gives you an opportunity to help because someone else is looking for your guidance. And so by doing that, I think it puts you in greater, I think you appreciate your own context of where you are with your work. And then you're also benefiting other people as well. And then that can actually kind of further you, I think, as well.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit. So we did the film screening at the Ohio History Center, and when like we had like this Q&A, and during the Q&A, I was able to talk a little bit about like just like being a community member, and I think a lot of times people think about being in community just like being amidst the community. And that's good, like, you know what I mean? That's needed, like, kind of like, that way people can put their eyes on you, can put their eyes on them. That's positive. But another really fundamental part of that is the exchange. And so, yeah, people pour into you when you're newer, when you're just kind of getting your bearings, getting your legs kind of in the community and trying to figure out, okay, who am I as an artist? How do I want to write and things like that? And then at the other end of that, like you can't, well, not even you can't, but it's just, it would be good for you to, once you're a little bit more solid, kind of build that up in other people that you see coming behind you, because that's kind of what keeps that cycle going. I think one of the things that we kind of saw happen during COVID was, essentially there's like this community of writers and poets both running shows and like they're running shows or they are frequent, they're consistently going to shows and things like that, and they're here really present in the community. And then like I think that like essentially what happened is you had that 2.5-3 years of like nothing really happening, and then now things are starting to get built back up, but so many of the people that were kind of that latest rung spread off, started doing other things, or they're kind of present in the community in some different ways, which that's not bad. But I'm saying that we kind of lost that little in between time where it's like, okay, these people that are trying to figure things out. They have like some people that they can ask questions to and kind of be in that process with before they really push themselves or are engaged in those similar spaces.
Yeah. I think you also see that like when people change arenas to a degree. I think you saw that with a lot of slam poets moving into like academia and stuff like that. It's like if you stayed in slam, whereas those, other people were leaving, some of you kind of like lose access to people who may have been able to help you or vice versa, which can be tricky. Okay, so we talked about just that sense of like finding that person that you can help, that you can guide, that you can kind of take on that role for. Who would you say is like another person that you think is helpful for poets to consider when they're thinking about their relationships within their community?
Trying to develop a relationship, a working artist relationship with somebody who's not a poet at all.
You stole one of mine. I was gonna say that. That's good.
And I mean, I think about it a lot because there's so many different communities that the poetry community kind of intersects with. I mean, I've been on the same show bill as people who are like trumpet players, drummers, singers, and stuff like that. Just people in general that are artists that are that are typically at our shows or just in our community in general. And it's really amazing because like in Columbus, there are no shortage of like shows where you can be sitting next to somebody who's like a Grammy nominated like artist or where you could be like in the room with somebody who's been in their field, operating, their instruments or what have you for decades. And like you're just at the same shows we're doing these things. So that's always really cool. And I think it kind of opens up things for me on a personal level when I'm kind of thinking about my work. I think one of the things that was really beneficial for me when I started doing doing like some like other performances was I went to a comedy open mic, and I just went there to hang out. Like one of my friends was performing, and I was just like, oh yeah, like this would be cool. So I went there to hang out, and I think that for me that show kind of erased the line that I used to have between poetry and comedy. I used to have like a very like these are my poems and then these are the things that I'm funny about. But I'm like, no, like I can merge those two things. And like those people, like if you try to do poems on their stage, they would laugh at you, but that might be good. But it'd be the bad laughter. They would be laughing at you, not with you, right?
But it would grow you, so it's good. But it's gonna be painful,
right? It is, but it's hard too because it's like I think in the poetry community, and I think I'm not so I want to preface this with like I'm not a person who says like I just know full encompassing what the poetry community is or does and things like that. I'm just in it in whatever capacity that I can be, right? But I do think that there is kind of a little bit of a reciprocal nature in the poetry community where it's like if in some spaces if you are doing funny poems or if your poem has on its face saying this poem is funny, there is not some kind of deep introspective I don't want, you know what I mean, like there's no, I mean there might be some metaphors and stuff like that for the purpose of comedy in this poem, but it's not a visceral, serious, cutting, bleeding poem. This is supposed to be light, levity, funny. I think that some places are less accepting of that. You know what I mean? At least initially. I can remember going to a workshop here in Columbus, and this was pre-pandemic. And at the workshop, essentially, like one of the people that was curating, or was actually the person that was running that workshop, and they're one of the people that kind of curate the space. They were like, and just keep in mind, you're not writing a stand-up set, you're writing a poem. And I'm just like, oh, it's both now. I immediately decided it was both. But yeah, it's just to say that like there's elements that I pull from different art forms that I find liberating for my practice. So, yeah.
And I think it doesn't even have to be necessarily people involved in art. I think again, like I think things are just so connected in ways that you don't expect them
Yeah.
to be. Like, for instance, from just like being a teacher, so I teach ESL, I focus a lot on pronunciation, but I've been able to tie aspects of that into like poetry, and I've learned a lot more about how to from a writing perspective, from a cadence perspective, from a performance perspective. Like, there's so many things I've learned thanks to my job that I can actually apply to poetry. And my guess is there's probably things that you can apply from your own line of work as well that can work in poetry too. Like, fields that can feel so different from each other can actually be very, very connected. I think you've seen
Yeah.
that even with the verses as a platform. Business and poetry typically feel like they're on opposite ends of a spectrum, but I think one of the things we see is actually there's still considerations there that can swing both ways, that can help people in business, but can also help poets. So just being open, every field is fair game for every other field. I think in a lot of ways. So you like I mentioned, you stole one of my topics, but that's okay. That's cool. And again, in case you just joined us, we're talking about 6 people that you can meet along your poetry journey that may be able to really help you out. And I think our next person, I would say, we talked about someone who is where you were like a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago. I would also add another person that you want is a peer, someone who's writing. Maybe you're not necessarily writing about the same thing, but you feel like your writing is comparable to their writing in terms of maybe not necessarily like aesthetic, but maybe in terms of goals and a writing ability for what those goals are. I think when you have that peer, I think it gives you another person to just establish that kind of connection with. You're probably at like similar stages. Like, for instance, if you're in publishing, maybe it's someone who's been published in like the same journals as you. Maybe it's someone who maybe you wrote a first book, they wrote a first book, kind of thing. Maybe you won similar awards. Like, I think having that sort of contemporary in parallel is also just as beneficial as people who are farther along or not as far along in the journey.
Yeah. I also think one of the things that having a peer can really help you recognize within yourself is like how much you do or do not emulate, I think, your mentors, right? Because your peer and your mentor is going to be different people or different like kind of people or entities. Because it's like, I think that when I first started performing here in Columbus, like I think that I initially sounded like myself. I would say, because I didn't really have a lot of other barometers, but typically myself was corny. So there's that.
Was
Fair enough, Jeff. We'll play it.
Two.
And then I met JG, award-winning poet here, like just incredible poet. But that's like, I met JG and he kind of took me under his wing and he kind of showed me some different like techniques, and like we're always training, we're always like working on like improving. But I think for a good amount of time there, like I sounded like him and I didn't really recognize it. As far as like I
lost your neck decreased.
Jay, if you're watching this, man, that's his joke.
That's on me, Jay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's
not
very
me.
low hanging fruit.
Oh man, but yeah, no, it's like I realized like I started, and it's not even like that's not a dig at that kind of process or even myself at that time. So like I think I'm absolutely a person who, oh, hey, Day Nate's here.
Oh, you brave.
But yeah, it's like, so, but it's definitely something that like while I was in that window of time, or while I was like a poet, like kind of in the community, didn't really realize like I was doing that until I started, I think, transitioning a little bit myself, and I was like, okay, like these are things that I'm actually really interested in, and things that I'm like doing that I actually really enjoy, or I can easily look through my work and I could piece apart the spaces that I'm actually excited about my work, and what parts of my work felt like, and not to say I wasn't not excited about those pieces, but it's just to say that like those pieces I could tell like, okay, like this is me when I'm transforming into like, this. If you ever met JG, like, like he's an incredibly powerful performer, right? And I think that like I was like, when I saw him he has this poem called Rhyme Animal. When I first saw that, I was like, I want to be powerful like that. Like I want to do things like that.
I want to be the rhyme.
I want to be the rhyme.
I am the rhyme man.
I am the rhyme man. That should be like, we're gonna create a superhero. But yeah, no, it's like, when I saw that, and like you might have like relatable experience, like when you see somebody that you really enjoy their writing or their performance or something like that, like you kind of subconsciously start writing kind of around that dynamic or how you can kind of write that dynamic. And so yeah, again, like I could just the version of me that existing right now, like I know, like, okay, like I know the kind of poems that I write and how I perform, and I'm a lot more intimate with like, the things that I enjoy doing and things that I do well. So yeah, having a peer, having somebody like, I think, who like is in relatively the same place, or at the very least you're discovering some of the same places that you are in like your poetry journey, I think can kind of bring a little bit a clear reflective surface to like, okay, like these are what this is what my peers are doing, this is what they're doing to kind of improve their writing and things like that, and like my process just looks like, trying to be this person. That's what it kind of feels like. So yeah.
Other people that you think would be helpful to meet on your journey, get to know better.
I mean, I don't know if this is one other person. I think that this is like one category of person that you should try to meet, or like one category of person that you should be open to, which is like essentially like what a slam judge is intended to be, right? A random person from the audience that doesn't have a whole bunch of experience with poems and all this other stuff.
So a wife or a partner or
AJ,
or like
again,
not like I was thinking more.
AJ,
Kathy doesn't do poetry.
I have nothing to do with
A
that
partner who.
But no, it's like I think having somebody like we're being aware and like being like wanting to connect with people that aren't, engulfed in the poetry world. What did she say?
We lost another one. I was gonna say last time she logs in the show. That's
but yeah, having somebody that's not like necessarily like, like really deep in the poetry world, having them being able to like kind of give commentary on your work, because like I think a lot of times it's like we have this kind of really polished kind of stick your nose up at people that like maybe give commentary on your work, like, well, you don't even know poems. But I'm like, well, hold on. Like, if your poems are only supposed to appeal to people that really truly love poems and like live and breathe poems every single day, like maybe that's a good strategy. Maybe that'll work. But it's possible that, and it depends on like kind of what your goals are with your poems and things like that as well. Because if I think it's all, it's not quite like that. So let me not say that. But yeah, no, it just speaks to the fact that there are people that don't have a whole bunch of experience with just poems on a daily basis that do know what they enjoy. They do know what they like to hear. They do know what they like to read. And so I think that it's really important to connect with those people, because sometimes like we can be a little bit diluted because we're hearing each other's poems all the time, or we're hearing poems all the time. So like our viewscape as far as like what we consider good or not good, or what we consider to be too long of a poem or too short of the poem, or the style of this performer and things like that those things can be really skewed.
Kind of gives me my like what if you wrote, forget how you normally write, like what if you had to write a poem to a group of people that normally you don't write to, so like for instance, if I were writing to Kathy. So my wife, she doesn't.
Shout out Kathy.
Yes. Hi, Kathy.
Hi, Kathy.
She came home. She's somewhere in this
Oh,
house.
she's fine.
She's the
That was
disembodied
not
voice
the ghost
that you may have heard.
That's not the ghost that is haunting this house. That's actually Kathy.
Yeah.
The ghost is much lower register.
Usually. Except for Kathy. No, just kidding. Kathy's alive.
Now we
but
have to bring proof of life. We have to like bring her on the show.
Kathy, can you say hi? No, like physically.
We need proof of life because Jeff said you may or may not be a ghost.
I said you're alive, but that ironically makes people think you're not.
Like, I have never been so sure that that Jeff committed a crime.
Like I was talking
And Jeff's like, she's for sure alive.
I was talking with a student today. They came to class. They had this cup and they were drinking. They're like, "This is not alcohol." I'm like, "Okay."
Wow.
But they were like 2 other times. They kept on insisting.
Trust
"This
me.
is not alcohol.
It's not alcohol.
But Ashanae doesn't know how to spell Kathy's name.
Uh-oh.
Spelled it with a C.
Oh, no.
There's a rookie.
Oh, no.
There's a rookie move here. Ajane getting so defensive about her name. Going out
yeah.
here, misspelled.
Come on. Come on.
Kathy with it. Oh. But we don't have. All right, hang on. I have to.
Hey!
Hang on. Hang on, we have to redo this. This might get crazy feedback. Help. Hi.
Hey!
Hey, everybody. That's Kathy. Everybody say hi to Kathy.
I don't know. If
Oh, Ajanae's here. Hey, Ajanae!
She spelled your name wrong, Kathy, so we had to
It's cool.
get back.
I was gonna put ghost, but I don't remember how to do that.
That's fair.
The ghosts will know.
But yeah, Ajane saying hey. Sierra saying hey.
There you go. That's better.
Cool.
Hey, Sierra!
All right.
Is that all you need from me?
We got enough proof.
We got proof
A
of
light feed of Kathy live.
That's
from
not
the living
AI
room.
generated at all. That's a real person. For sure. For sure that's a real person.
That light is so hot. It is
All right.
not hell in my living room. It just looks like it. Yeah, they're broadcasting from the sun. It's just so yellow.
This is the camera you got me, so I don't know, man.
Right. Sierra's never seen you, but now she's seen you. Mystery solved. She's a real person. I actually got married.
Oh, that's the wrong way to spell Jeff. Oh no!
What is happening? All right, people are just getting mad passive aggressive.
It's like his name is right there.
It's fine. It's fine. It's not usual spelling. All right, Kathy, I relieve you of your duties.
All right, I gotta go water the plant, so I'll be there.
Oh, watch out for
Bye. Have a
mosquitoes.
good rest.
Bye. All right. Oh, sorry, I kicked her out.
no.
That's it. But she can bring herself back. It gets worse. I forget what we were talking about. So I'm married.
And that's what this podcast.
Very happy.
No, we're talking about so like just like people that have experience like or that like are
Oh,
really
let's let the spike kind of ride it out. Okay, spike's over. Okay, so like imagine like, what if you had to write a poem for a group of people and your goal is to really make that group of people really like your poem? You'd probably have to do some things pretty stylistically different if it's a group you're not normally writing for.
yeah.
You know, like I feel like that would actually be an interesting writing challenge.
Right, for a group of people that you're not.
Yeah.
Like would you interview them?
That's a good question because I mean you gotta know them. You know, the better you know them, the more you can be like the word choices and the line structure and stuff. But anyways, that's just take that idea and do with it what you will. Other people, I think one group of people that we didn't talk about, but I think it's kind of been implied this entire time is the idea of like a mentor, someone to take on. So we talked about, you know, someone who's like 2 years behind you, you know, in terms of where they are in their journey, someone who's with you, and then someone who's also ahead of you.
Yeah.
So just to kind of give you a guide. So like, for instance, if you're writing a book, someone who's written a book. If you're going for an award, someone who's won the award. If you want to be a teacher, someone who teaches. I think having that guide out there can just allow you to avoid the shortcomings. It can speed up your own journey because they can kind of be like, no, don't do it like this, do it like this. And I think you see it in the poetry community a lot. I mean, that's why I think a lot of people end up doing like MFA programs, because it just advances that even if your craft's already at a certain point, maybe the other professional aspects of writing,
Yeah.
in terms of the connections or the awareness of different opportunities, that's where the role of a mentor can be really, really helpful.
Yeah. I also think that's like, I think sometimes when we think about a mentor, a lot of times when we're thinking about a mentor, we're thinking about somebody who puts us in position for things. And I think that's that's not the best way, I think, to think about it in its initial phase. I think a lot of times, like, you should really be thinking about a mentor as like somebody who is or has experience with something that you like, and is something like where you want to be in your craft, and not necessarily in your goal as a career, right? So like, if you're a poet and you're like, man, I want to one day I want to be a poet that performs at Harvard or something like that. I don't know. Like, I want Harvard to book me. Like, probably the thing to look at is not, okay, can this person put me on with Harvard so I can perform? It's really like, does this person have the wisdom and guidance to be able to make me into the person that, or to help me become the person that Harvard would book? Like, you know what I mean? And that's a really crude example, but that's like an example nonetheless, right? And so that trickles down to things like, a full set of poems. Like, so like maybe your most immediate goal, like you just started doing poems, or you just started being within the general poetry community in your city, your state, or what have you, and somebody who is very frequently getting features and things like that. So you probably, again, you don't want to ask them, hey, can you put me on with this venue so I can get a feature? Like, because maybe you don't have 5-6 poems to put together to get a feature. Maybe you don't have, maybe you've never performed. You and Jeff, I know Jeff with a G. Yeah, I'm sure you've probably came across this as well. Like, people that, this will be their first open mic or their first kind of event, and they're like, hey, like, I want to feature somewhere, like, and they're asking people like, okay, what do I do to go feature? What do I do to go feature? Or who would I have to talk to about featuring? And I'm like, with the 6 poems that you have never said out loud to anybody in your entire life before, like, and like, again, you probably are not going to feature with your first 6 poems, maybe, you know what I mean? So, or like, I don't know how long, however long your feature is. And so I think a lot of times, like, we're thinking about that wrong. We're thinking about mentorship as like somebody putting us in position, but I think it's much better to think about it like somebody that can, create the like the elements inside of you, like, okay, maybe you can't, or maybe you do have the number to this venue runner, but like, if I give you the number to the venue runner and you go to the venue runner and you're like, hey, make me a feature, like, oh, have you performed, have I heard you, have you done this, have you done that? And I think that's like, when I think about like my trajectory and the stuff that even JG did for me, my first feature was not from JG specifically that I know of. Like, I want to, like, if I find something out like 10 years later, like JG was actually winning me the call, I don't know. But I do know, like, the first feature that I ever got was because somebody saw me performing, like, I performed like 2 poems back to back at some other venue, and they saw me, or they saw a video that somebody had of me, and then it was like actually in Cleveland, and this guy ended up booking me for that. But I'm like, I wouldn't have been able to do that if I'm not working on poems with JG, if I haven't performed these other spaces, and like, things have been working in that direction. So yeah, so as like, when you are approaching a mentor, if you're trying to get a mentor, I think it's a much better route to take as far as asking how can you become better as a poet or as a facilitator or whatever you're looking for mentorship in, and maybe even directly asking like, hey, I'm looking for a mentor. I don't know if you have the time or the space in your schedule or anything like that, but I would love to, you know,
Yeah.
be mentored by you, menteed by you. Be mentored by you.
mentored.
Your mentee.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that speaking to that, I mean, in the poetry feature thing, I mean, if you're asking to be featured somewhere, then you're already asking probably the wrong questions. And even like from a mentor like perspective, I think sometimes what you see people do is just like copy all the things. Like it's interesting, like when you see like interviews with people, like people will like be like, okay, let me find out what this person did in childhood and see what they did, or let me see what their daily routine is. And I think a lot we're missing sometimes like the real key. Like the real key isn't necessarily like the individual actions that they're taking. Like the
Yeah.
real key is the mindset behind the actions,
Yeah.
you know. So it's like, oh, they eat like raw eggs, like they eat 2 raw eggs every morning, so I'm gonna eat 2 raw eggs but you're missing the entire thing. Why are they doing that? Like what's the thought process that led them to realize that this like these eggs are the things I want to do, you know?
And a lot of, I think being a mentor and having a mentee is, it's weird. And this is not a direct analogy, but it's like it has some similarities, like having like a child, right? So like if you are
Tell me.
mentoring, if you're mentoring somebody, a lot of like the things that you're probably doing in that a mentee is probably looking for is to be able to benefit from your experience as opposed to benefiting from making the same exact mistakes that you always made, right? So if like let's say, if I was mentoring somebody right now when it came to like even when it came to like short filmmaking, I think when I very first started doing it and our very first was like, and like this was like years ago back when I was like a teenager and I just had this like phone and like, so I used to have this phone that like had this, it was super old. It was like a Boost mobile phone.
Oh, you boost mobile.
Yeah.
Wait, did you have one like the walkie-talkie ones?
I did not. No, I didn't. I had like the one that was like an imitation razor. It was not the razor, but it was like an imitation razor. Actually, no, yes, it did. It did have the little. It did have that. Because I used to be very annoying with that. But it was funny because like I didn't have like anybody on the other end. Like I didn't like nobody was like.
Yourself.
I was not a popular kid, right? So I would be doing that to nobody.
Roger, do you copy? Do you copy, Roger? Roger!
Get him out of there! But yeah, no, it would be like, so I had this like phone and it was the first phone that I had that had video capabilities. And as you might assume, it was terrible. I am old.
1 megapixel.
Guys, I am what would be considered an old person. Okay, so this back then we went from having phones that had 0 cameras inside of them to having phones that had terrible cameras inside of them. Now we have
Now you can't even get a phone without it.
you can't even get a phone without it, right? So essentially, I had this phone that essentially I would be able to. Like you could be recording, and this was like the very first one of these that I had, that I could record, and then I could push pause on the recording.
Oh.
And so when I push pause on the recording, essentially it allowed me to then play, like reinitiate the recording, and it would just pick up the recording where it was. And so we used to do these like little comedy videos where like essentially like my friend would be holding something, he would be like holding like a shoe, and we would pause it and then we'd play it and the shoe would be gone. We'd be doing all these little things. It would be funny. And like somebody, I was like I was trying to figure out how to get into short films and stuff like that. And like I listened to some very bad advice from somebody that I'm sure was like just very jaded at their experience maybe. But they were just like, yeah, like, write down all your ideas, and then like, but just like don't waste your ideas on the equipment that you have right now. Like, wait until you get like this, that, and the
Oh,
third.
interesting.
And I think about it because I'm like, man, if I were to give anybody any advice, it would be like whatever. Especially because like in 2024, the lowest barrier, like a lot of times, you at least have a phone right. More than likely, you have a phone right now that could get you most of the capabilities you would need to make something watchable. You know what I mean? And or there's like just maybe one or two accessories, maybe just one accessory, because if you have like a clip-on mic that you can just plug, if you have like I know they have them for both iPhones, but they also have them for, I guess, iPhones. The newer ones have a C port import now, so it's like it's pretty universal. And so like you have pretty much everything that you need in order to create the films and the short films that you really want. And I'm like, I would have been like, hey, as opposed to being the person who waits until you have everything together.
Making nothing, yeah.
Yeah, instead of making nothing and just writing your ideas and hoping for the right things one day, just start right now. Just start doing it. And I think that's like, again, as the mentor to mentee relationship has to be one where like the mentor is okay with watching, and not only okay, like excited for and actively pushing towards the mentee accelerating faster than they did.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's kind of the point. The point is like, you're my mentee because I have all of the experience right now. That there's some stuff that you have to do, like you got to put your 10,000 hours in, you know what I mean, like there's no getting around that, but maybe I can make sure that you don't waste time here,
right,
when you should be spending more time here, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's just like some advice on the mentor mentee dynamic, I suppose.
All right, I think that takes us to about 6 people,
I think so,
and that's all I told you were going to get.
yeah. We're not going to tell you the 7th person. The 7th person is Joe, and he did travel back from the future. But we'll let Joe tell you about that.
Is there a character named Joe in Back to the Future?
I don't. Maybe there will be in the future.
That's for sure. Another movie admission, I've never seen Back to the Future.
You've never seen Back to the Future?
You keep being surprised. I'm surprised that you're surprised every
time. Back to the Future is like a I let some stuff slide. I let some things slide. But Back to the Future, you've never seen Back to the Future? None of them?
None of them.
Oh,
they kept trying and I kept saying no.
That's like
it's
like the original.
Guys, I don't see movies. I don't see it.
But that's like one that you should like when you're a kid. Like, you know what I mean?
I think
like,
I missed the boat. It's like my wife tried to introduce me
Titanic?
to. I don't know if I've ever actually watched the full Titanic. I've seen like clips, like from like all the random parts, and I think
spoiler
if you put
alert,
all the
it
parts,
does not go well.
But I don't know if I've ever seen Titanic in like one sitting.
So, but you feel like, have you seen it all?
I feel like I've seen. Okay. I feel like if you cobbled together all the random parts of Titanic I've seen at random times, I think you would get a whole movie.
Dude, I saw Titanic when it was on VHS. Like,
you were probably front row theaters.
I was not. It was not in the theater. No, I definitely saw it on tape. It was on 2 different cassettes. It was on 2.
Oh, really?
It was.
Why? It wasn't that long.
Yes, it was.
Was it?
Titanic? Hold on. How long? It doesn't.
Someone vouch for this man. Like, what? Is it that long?
Like a 3-hour movie on a cassette used to be.
Is that? Maybe. All right. I don't know if Google's gonna know. How many
you don't know if 3 hours and 15 minutes.
Okay, so how many VHS? Okay.
But it was like,
I
think that it was like, because it's on VHS, depending on, I don't think VHS went for like 3 hours.
Maybe not. Yeah. All right.
They had like box sets for VHS.
So, yeah, this is true. Yeah. But anyways, I haven't seen it. If there's a Joe in Back to the Future, can someone let us know? I'm just kind of curious.
If there is a Joe that does travel through time, can you please appear right behind us right now? I guess not.
I mean, that might have been it. I don't know. Is that you, Joe?
Wherever you are traveling through time right now, just slip through the time stream and just give us a wave. Let us know that you're out there patrolling the timeline.
Anyways, if there are other people that you think are important to go through on your journey, to meet, strengthen your relationship with, help them, they help you. You guys can grow along your poetry journeys. We'd love to know who you think those people are.
Have you ever had any poetry nemesis? Nemesis? Like somebody who you're like to be clear, like you have to be a peer to be a nemesis, right? Like you have to be somebody who's like, man, like this person is really, really good.
I think
kind of work.
I think this also ties well into the concepts we talk about, just like be remarkable and things like that. And I think in business you'll hear about like brand, in like other industries you hear about like reputation. Like I think that we want to stay away from neutral. Like I think neutral is just like I think neutral is like this, like the death of art. Like if you fall into the neutral category, like it's just so hard to get people to know about your work and care about your work, So like I guess I would kind of ask myself, what are you known for? And I think the greater answer you have for that, the more you can kind of start polarizing. We've talked about kind of in the past this need for like an enemy to kind of go against. Even if you have to kind of make up the concept. We talked about in the stream before, like the one guy, like they made like a new type of soap, and so they made who's their enemy? Their enemy is Big Soap, which obviously doesn't like exist, but kind of doesn't exist. Like kind of like made it up and like defined it, and then like so that way you could kind of like see like Big Soap and other things. It's like I think with like writing. I think like the Diverse's mission in a lot of ways is a little bit divisive for some people. It gets into kind of some tricky territory. When you merge poetry and business, people kind of start raising their guard a little bit. Yeah. Which I get, but I think it's important, so I move forward on it because I think poets really, I don't know, like just like money knowledge I think tends to be lacking a little bit in the arts, and like money in and of itself doesn't have to be a horrible thing. It's a necessary thing for survival. So then how can we do it, how can we get it in a way that doesn't make the world a worse place and things. So I think in that regard, the Verse is doing something that sometimes can get people in their feels about to a degree. In terms of my own work personally, I feel like I've had a reputation as someone that I don't think I do it as much now, but like just like cutting stuff and like really trying to get to like the essence of what a poem is really about and removing the excess stuff. Which I think gelled with some people, but also didn't gel with everybody.
Yeah, I think that, when I think about like what you do with poems or what you like to do with poems, I think about, you know what? I think it's funny because whenever we're in a workshop space and like you're like leading the workshop, and it's funny because like now I can be looking at a poem and like I can guess what you're gonna say about the poem. So, and but it's a good thing because it's like I think it's also like it speaks to like styles and things like that, because I think that you have if you've read any of Jeff's poems or if you've like seen Jeff perform any of his poems, like you'll one of the things you'll notice is that there's like no fat there, right? So there's no kind of like the waiting room of the poem of what happens a lot, like it happens a lot of times. A lot of times like the poem, like you're presented with the poem and there's like this little waiting room into the poem that's like you're kind of in the poem, like you're in the doctor's office but you're not at the appointment yet. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of people's poems kind of happen like that. A lot of that happens with some of my poems at times. And so I think that like just like watching how you organize yourself around your own poems, or how you organize like selections and things like that, and then like being able to be in enough spaces with you like that, it's like I can tell, okay, this is kind of like how you would engage, or this would what your approach would be. And I think the fun thing is now, which is like I think that like because it's also like poetry is subjective, right? So like if you wrote a poem and you have a waiting room in your poem, it's like that's just as valid as not, you know what I mean? As like the thing that you would cut and kind of make like any number of people might think it's better or stronger if you take those things away, but because it's your work, like it's your work. So yeah, I think that I would say that is your reputation, I think, in the poetry community to a degree. I don't think maybe people wouldn't have the conversation with me. Like I don't know if I would necessarily. I think it's like a positive thing, but it's also like I can see somebody being like nervous, like man, like I think, or I thought that I did this poem, or I cut this poem as much as I possibly could, and then like kind of seeing you being like, but did you cut it enough? Reduce.
I think that just the idea of reputation as a writer, like I would much rather have a reputation than not have a reputation for something, even if it's a reputation that like I may not, adhere to as strictly as people may assume. I rather have some space in your mind for some view about my work than no space in your mind about view of my work. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So did you have a nemesis in specific?
Like a person?
Yeah. Somebody in the poetry community that you're like, yeah, like I'll give you a good. So for me, for a very long time, and like me and him have like had this conversation a lot. Zach Hanna is one of those people that like, I think that when I first started doing poems in the poetry community, I had like the first show that I went to that I didn't have a hand in helping run or anything like that was Writer's Block, and that was my first time being in the poetry community, like in the wild, you know what I mean? That's like not in like amongst friends and people that I'm like already around, right? And so when I first went, and I think it was might have been like a couple times before I actually really heard Zach. Because I think he had already been going there, I'm sure, but I think that maybe I caught it like in between, like maybe he was like out for a week or two or something like that. Doesn't matter. But like I think it was like my third or fourth time going there, and I heard Zach, and I remember thinking to myself like, whatever he's doing, like if this is poems, like what am I doing? Like what is the thing that I'm doing? And it's not even just because of the quality of the writing, which I want to be clear, like Zach is a great writer, right? So like I'm not trying, like let's assume that. But I think it's like, I think the adventure that he has in his work is just really wonderful, right? But it was also something I was jealous of, because I was like, I felt really confined by what I thought poems had to do, what I thought poems had to be. I thought poems had to be this long. I thought poems had to sound like this. I had to talk like this. And so I was, for a long time, I was like just jealous with like the adventure that he has, like these crazy concepts, crazy scenarios, crazy, titles and stipulations that he has for his poems, that he's like just really free, you know what I mean? And so I think that like that was like a challenging metric, and not necessarily in the way that I would be like, okay, I gotta write like Zach, but I'm like, how can I be freer with things that are closer to me? How can I be freer with my technique or with my exploration? And that drove me for not, I mean, so that wasn't the singular driving force, but it was definitely something that like drove me for a long time. I even think about like Jordan, also Sue Flat. Oh my God, like Sue's adventures like in her poems is just crazy. Yourself. So I think there's like people that again, and when I say nemesis, I'm not saying it like, like you hate them, because it's like, it's not about hate. Like,
Right.
I would actually, it's like, you really love your nemesis because, like, you need them, right? Like I if not for Zach, I'm sure that I don't challenge myself as much as I did back then, and as much as I still try to do now. Like, there's always a little part of me when I'm like getting into new territory, and I'm like, if I'm like a little bit scared, I'm like, would Zach be afraid? Like, like, would Zach be like, man, this isn't a poem, I can't do this, I can't work this thing through. And so there's always like something kind of in that, and it kind of works like that with like a couple different people that I really admire, poetry wise, but I'm able to like kind of look and reflect on their work and think that, like, okay, I want to delve into this. Should I be afraid to kind of delve into this? Like, what will happen if I do that? Yeah.
I can get that. I think it's tricky with poetry because I think it's very easy. We actually just put a reel out. We did a talk with Ty Chapman, who does children's books and then also does poetry. And we were talking briefly about just like, writers, we're not in competition with each other because we're all on different paths, And I think I feel like I often put myself in very difficult positions, like intentionally, or I take paths that are a lot less predictable because I feel like with poetry, the general path is geared toward like nonprofit academia. So like what a lot of poets do, you get the MFA, you publish in these journals, you get the teaching job, you apply for the grants, you go for the fellowships and things like that. And in a lot of spaces I'm in, just like with like Hallelujah and Cave and poetry, you see people going on those paths, or you see people doing like the slam route, or a mixture of the both. And those are just, I get them, and I feel like at the same time, just the direction that my own life has gone has been different, just between having a kid and like the job stuff and like being a stay at home dad for like 5 years, so it's like, so all these things that just would have made those sorts of decisions more difficult. For me, I think it's just like just coming to terms with the fact that, hey, like that MFA academia teaching route, at least for the point of time I'm in right now, not for you. But then at the same time, it's just, what is the alternate path? So I think just like creating like the verses, like trying to show that goal of like, hey, there is another way. You probably want some like specific names. So like people I look at, like for instance at Kalu, like, a lot of my experiences have been like, there have been a lot of parallels. So, like at Kalu, it was like me, like, and then Will Evans was there, like
Shout
from
out to
Columbus,
Will.
who also has a kid, and like also has like kind of like doing his own thing. So like some parallels, like with that, he goes to more traditional. Recently got like his MFA and stuff like that. Or like at Cave, like everyone, so many people there are, doing the traditional stuff. So, I think it can feel kind of isolating in some regards because there's not a lot of, I don't, if you ask me like who is someone else doing what you're doing, I don't know. Whereas like for a lot of the other stuff, like who do you know going for the MFA route? I can name you 20, 30, 40 people. Like who's the professor? I can name you people, but like for people doing what I'm doing, it's like,
Is the poet life, does he have this?
but even that's probably the closest. Like Christoph from
yeah.
the Poet Life is probably the closest. There's no, I can't point to anyone in Columbus.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
Like even like Scott. I mean, Scott with like the Streetlight Guild. The Streetlight Guild is a lot of times more arts focused. I'm not interested in arts focused. I'm interested in poetry focused. And I know that Scott has like the sweet spot for poetry, but let's be clear, Streetlight's doing a lot of things beyond.
Yeah,
poetry,
I also think like, I mean, I think that when it comes to what Diversus does, or what I think that the kind of focus that Diversus has, I think there is a subsection of people that are very, very interested in very, very, or they're in need of some direction on how to make poetry, like in
Mm-hmm.
specific, make their poetry into like
Mm-hmm.
some like a larger concept or something that
Mm-hmm.
can actually feed them and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. So, and I feel like that maybe is like a little bit of like, it's just they're
Mm-hmm.
just like kind of different, like two sides of the same coin almost.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe they're two different
No.
coins. I don't know. But it's just like, there's like one that's like really focused on like kind of like the art, what the art is doing in this space. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
there is an arm of that creates like funds and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be fairly intentional about that, and that like,
Yeah.
or the more intentional you are about that, the better off I would say you go. Whereas like, I think like the thing that Versus does is like, it's putting that arm first, and it's like, this is kind of how you're able to
Mm-hmm.
kind of build that up.
Yeah. Which is, when you're doing something that feels very untrodden and you don't have a whole lot of other people in your community to look at, it's kind of there's just a lot of uncertainty because like a lot of times people want the social proof and it's like, well, I don't necessarily have a ton of social proof because there's not really a whole lot to look at. A lot of your successful poetry organizations are nonprofit organizations. You know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah.
there's not. So when your goal is to kind of create the model, there's a lot of risk there because it's like maybe this hasn't happened because it's not possible. You know what I mean? So it's like
Mm-hmm.
that's not the mindset I have, but I've had the thought come to mind, if that makes sense. I think anytime you do something that's new and risky, you're gonna have those sorts of thoughts. So then the question is, wait, what do you do with it? And for me, it's just like, no, well, we forge ahead, and if it doesn't work, then now other people can know it doesn't work. But I don't personally, I don't even view that as an option. You know, um, but
But I also think the thing that helps is like, I think that all of the things that we've talked about here, or that we've done, are things that they do, like they individually work. Like all of these things individually work, right? So like,
mm-hmm,
marketing yourself or marketing your poems, like we've seen people monetize themselves, or monetize their poetry, monetize their work in a growth trajectory, over time. The thing that I think is like, we haven't seen, or maybe like, we haven't seen incredibly often, is somebody saying, okay, like, let's take some of the things that this person did, or some of the things that we know are successful in that kind of area, and kind of put them into something that's formal that you can actually follow along
mm-hmm,
with and kind of do. Because it might be really difficult to like, be like, I'm a poet that started doing poems 2-3 years ago, I'm really in my craft and I really like poems.
mm-hmm.
How do I become somebody like Jasmine Mans? Like, how
Right.
do I not even necessarily how do I have the, you know
Mm-hmm,
the largeness of Jasmine Man's platform now,
mm-hmm,
but how do I put myself on that trajectory, or how do
mm-hmm,
I kind of get that thing started? So having something like Diverses that says, okay, well, you have to actually think about it. I saw there was like a commercial for a movie, or it was a show. I think it was a movie though. And this girl said something that was real, like it was like flippant, but it was actually really insightful, because it was like, I don't think it was like some kind of, it's not inspiration or anything. It was like a scary movie, but she was talking about famous people, and she was just like, do you not think that every single famous person that is famous right now wanted to be famous? Or do you think that just all happened by accident? And I'm like, I was thinking about that. I'm like, that's actually like really insightful, because like, if you are somebody who's like, I really want to be this person 5 years from now, it's like it's really dreamy and folksy to feel like, oh, like they were just practicing guitar somewhere, and
mm-hmm.
somebody saw them, and they saw them and they became famous. Like, you really want to dream up that scenario, and that's 1 in a million, maybe less. You know what I mean? But what's more likely is you're working consistently towards your goal, and when you've been working so long towards your goal, eventually something clicks, and now you're in position, or you're ready and you're in position. I even think about like the short film, like even being part of the panel, because I had been wanting to do short films for a very long time, and I had worked on small things here and there, but it was only when I was really serious and I was like really like, okay, I have to really start creating product that I can have. Like I have a short film that I have, and I have several short films that I just have as product. So now when a film festival comes along and they're like, somebody's like, hey, I'm doing this film thing, like, oh, like I can be like, I'm prepared with something in this capacity. And I think that's like a very practical and real thing for like a lot of people that again, they might not have the formal capacity to really understand about themselves or what's kind of needed, which I think diverse is like, no, let's put it in the forefront. You need poems, you need to know what your poems are doing. Yes, you need to be a student of crafts, but kind of what's important for our purposes is that you know what your poems are bringing to the table. You know what you're doing to push your poems and push yourself as a brand.
Yeah. And I think we were talking about the famous person and like goals and things like that. Again, we talked about before, like the concrete, specific goal. Like if you just say I want to be famous, the problem is when you close your eyes and you think that, you don't see anything. But it's like, no, like I want to speak on stage in front of 2,350 people. Excuse me. Like I can, okay, now then you can kind of reverse engineer that, Sierra asks, how do you overcome the fear of going live?
Do it.
I mean, which is what she says. Answer my question. Just do it. I mean, yeah. I mean, the short answer is just that. I think do it, but do it with intentionality. I think I mentioned this before. One of the things I tell my students, my English students, is like I tell them, hey, you're 10,000 mistakes from the English you're looking for. So in the case of live streams, I would say, hey, you're 10,000 live stream mistakes away from being the live streamer that you want to be, which means that you just have to do it. But I think if you're going to take that kind of mindset further, we're not just trying to make 10,000 mistakes, but like 10,000 different mistakes. You can't, if you just keep doing the same mistake over and over again, I mean, that's not productive. We have to be kind of intentional with our mistakes. Intentional be like, okay, what happens if I turn up my volume too loud on my microphone? What happens if I make too soft? What happens if I do this with the light? What happens if I do that? Like, every single stream is an opportunity to try something a little bit different. And I think talking about in terms of viewers and things like that. So this depends on the platform you're using. When we're doing our live streams, I don't really care how many people are on, because the thing with the live streams is when the live streams are finished, you then have that video to do whatever you want with it. I'm not even in a position right now to do all the things that I want to do with our backlog. We have a huge backlog. How long have we been doing the podcast for? Like a year? Over. A lot. I don't have all those videos still saved, but I have a very large number of them. So like one day
we should have that. We should have that memorized. Like what? I guess it's easy enough to check. We should have a podiversary.
Yeah, we should. One day when I have more capacity, this stuff snowballs. So one day when I have more capacity, for instance, something I could do, I could hire an editor and I could just hand them the videos like, yo, from these streams, make, 10 clips, 20 clips, 100 clips. Give me 5 10-minute videos, 4 3-minute videos, and then 100 15-second. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's not about the live stream. The live stream's nice because you get to chat with people who do happen to stop by and cool. And if the viewer numbers bother you, what you can do is you can just kind of like put your thumb or like put some tape over the number so you don't know how many people are actually in the room with you. Just hide the number. Just don't look at it. Block it from you if you keep looking at it. because it really doesn't matter, especially on a platform like YouTube. We actually just did a YouTube workshop, and one of the things we talked about was YouTube is in some ways the most forgiving social media platform because I don't know about you, but if I type something in YouTube, I regularly get results from like 5 years ago, 7 years ago. You know,
Yeah.
on Instagram, when's the last time your Instagram feed gave you something from 3 years ago? You know what I mean? Or like your TikTok. No other platform's doing that. You know, um, so I'm very big on YouTube. YouTube's been super helpful for me from my main business, but it's also been helpful from the poetry side of things as well.
Yeah. I also think that there's like something really, I think, unique about, I think, creating content without the need of somebody like kind of viewing it and kind of observing it, especially like at least in real time, right? So it's like it's like there's a dependency on people seeing it at some point, right? Like it's like you're not creating it so that nobody sees it. But I think a lot of times we're only thinking about people seeing something like right now, and I'm like, let's say we're doing this for another 6 months, and then a clip that we have goes viral, right? Like people are like, man, like that was really cool. Probably something Matthias said because he's so witty and hilarious. And can I say handsome as well? These are just examples that I'm throwing out there. But then if somebody finds that and they're like, man, that's really really cool. I really want to follow up with that. Like, or that's just a really cool thing to hear or something that's really insightful. They can go back and see all the things that we worked on, all the things that we said, all the things that we did on the platform, and it just gives them a more of a reason to kind of stick around and stay around. I mean, you probably know, like it happens all the time. You might see a clip from a show somewhere, and you're like, it happens a lot of times with anime, right? Like you might see like a fight scene or something like that. Somebody posted a fight scene from an anime, and you're like, whoa, like what? It's that show from, and then you go to the show, and now you're a lifelong fan of the show, and like you're following it like everywhere. So it's just like, you're creating right now, but you're not always creating for right now, and you also have to keep in mind that like the things that you're doing can be really really useful for somebody later on. You just have to create it. Like what's the old adage? Build it and the people will come. And the people will come. I'm not saying they're gonna come right now, but they're gonna come.
I think just to highlight that point, I'm looking at one video right now that's on my main channel that's doing well. So like this is a video I posted in 2023. I posted it in April of 2023. So from April 2023 to December 31st, 2023, it got 2,093 views. Okay. In 2024, so going from January 1st, 2024 to today, it got 5,700 views. So we got more than double what it got in the first, 6 months of its life, But if I never posted that video, or originally that first year, I might have been a little disappointed. But now, in 2024, it's like, it got twice as many views as it did the first 6 months. So you don't know when things are what's gonna do well and when it's gonna do well.
I mean, I think there's an instant gratification, like a want for like that instant gratification.
For sure.
Like you wish that your first post on on YouTube went crazy viral and everybody flocked to it. But I'm like, I don't know. I might be wrong. I don't know if anybody's experience is like that. Unless you're already incredibly well known and people already know your work and stuff like that. But again, typically from the creators that I follow, like their experiences, they were doing it for years. They were just chugging along for years. They were kind of growing incrementally, but they were just pushing along for years.
That's the story.
They had a video that made commentary on something, and that shot them up, and now they're in the millions.
But if you didn't make the earlier stuff, then it wouldn't have done.
Now
I don't.
Their other stuff is getting the kind of views that they always wanted for their there's movies and there's films and there's content and there's segments that they've posted that they're like, now it's just there. So now somebody's gonna become a subscriber and they're just gonna go through all your stuff. Oh, I love that. That's good. And you might see other stuff go viral because of that. So
It's the long game. You know, the phrase is, it takes 10 years to be an overnight success.
yeah,
It's a common thing. And again, I think YouTube gives you the best chances of that. I think another thing I would say too is that what was I? Oh, sometimes like going viral, I would much rather grow by like 10 subs a day that really care about my work than like 100 subs a day that never check out my stuff. We were looking at like Button, the YouTube channel for Button Poetry. Button Poetry, which has 1.4 million subscribers, who like their last 2 or 3 videos. But like if I had a channel that had 1.4 million subscribers and my video gets 800 views after a week, that's a problem.
yeah,
Something's not working. Because like one of my second channel for teaching, like I put a video up and we have 8,000 subs on that channel, and that video it broke 1,000 views in 2 days. So it's like, something's not working on the
yeah.
Button
It's
side.
better to be to have a community of people that are engaged with your
Yeah.
work than just having a general fan base that is like,
Yeah.
I'm a poet, so I'm gonna subscribe to Button Poetry because I am a poet. But if somebody is like creating poetry that you really truly love, then you're like, oh, I'm gonna be checking in. Oh, I can't wait for them to drop this, or because I want to see what's happening next. I want to see what's going on with their work. So it's like, it's again, I can't really speak to naturally however Button does their stuff. Like, so there's no commentary there. It's just to say that like I'm sure it would be better for really anybody, and like exactly what you're saying, for it to be like, well, if I have all of these viewers, I want these viewers to be engaged with what they're watching.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard because Button, their approach is they just post videos of people reading poems, and people don't go to YouTube to find people reading poems. So they're in a tough spot just by they're doing it. Sierra says that's how I want to. Sierra. Oh. Sierra's so sweet.
Yeah.
Also asking, do you all fear AI for artists? Depends what kind of artist you are. And depends.
It depends on if AI. I mean, he's a point guard now, but he's retired.
Oh, Sierra says get so excited. Sierra's so sweet. She's the best. Get more people like. You want more people like Sierra. That's what you want.
Sierra.
We all need more Sierras in our lives. Fear for artists. So, if you make mediocre quality work that has no direct appeal to a specific audience, you're screwed. You're gonna get buried. You're gonna get buried. There's no other way around it. Like this is true. This is true for music. Like I told you about. I showed Dante like to Google like if you're just like trying to make like background tracks for music. Like if you're trying to do like lo-fi, AI can do that. If you're trying to do stock photo, AI can do that.
For sure.
And in fact, it can do it better than you can, because the problem with stock photo is, and this is from I've had to use stock photo for projects before. The problem with stock photo is you find something that's close enough to what you're looking for. You're like, all right, well, I needed a picture of a seagull eating this. It's not eating what I wanted it to, or it's too far to the left. I needed it over there, but it's close enough to what I wanted, Whereas like AI, I can tell it all the specifics. I'm like, no, I need this seagull to be eating 2 French fries with its left claw and a hamburger with its right. Like, I can't do that with a stock photo.
Can't do that with an actual seagull either.
They won't very, very difficult. Very.
Can't train those things.
But those AI seagulls, oh man, they can do whatever you tell them. Like So
they love you. Keep it together, Matt.
AJ and A can. If you ask her. I think. I mean, this is another reason with the verses why I think starting the verses when we started is really, really key, because I think that we have right now probably a like 2 or 3 year window where we're still in that stage where the AI stuff is coming out. It's still relatively new. We still don't entirely know. We haven't seen all the uses it's going to be used for. So there's some real advantages to this. You can use AI now as leverage and not get buried just yet.
Yeah.
But the problem is this stuff gets better so exponentially fast that I do think there's some urgency here, because I think the landscape's going to look very different in 2 years. So especially like the video generation stuff. So this is the time to, Ajane, we're just glad you're here. Just glad you're here. I think this is the time right now to really create separation for yourself. We talked earlier about reputation. This is the time to get a reputation for something. This is the time to get people to understand what your art is and to resonate with it. This is the time for you to have some specific things that really separate you from other people. We talked about this in the street. Ajane was actually on a stream with us, and we were talking about like becoming a leader in your space, you know, oftentimes by combining two fields. Like for instance, Ajane is doing like religion and poetry, you know, or you can do it like through like maybe like a tech and poetry, or like philosophy and poetry, whatever, mental health and poetry, whatever the thing is, whatever individualizes you. So this is the time to do it, like now, really like yesterday, but now. And the other area where I think we're going to have an advantage, like people, too, if you want to leverage it, is starting to build up your in-person community. Because AI is not going to be able to... AI can't replace in-person events just yet. So I think in-person events are going to be one arena that are going to be really key to reaching people, because the online space is probably going to get really flooded with things. So I guess my personal stance is I don't fear AI, but I fear for other people who aren't taking advantage of all the things that are happening right now. I fear for them. If you're not positioning yourself right now, I fear for you if you're not thinking about this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely something that you should be. I think we should know at this point that AI is trending towards being much better than it is tomorrow, let alone
this is the worst it's ever going to be,
you know. And I think that like there's probably somebody that like owned a typewriter company, and they were like surely these computers are a fad. And I'm like, eventually they like, if you're not looking to like, maybe that company could have innovated into computers, and they could have been like, well, let's get a stake there, or let's kind of try to innovate there. But maybe they were like, well, surely people are gonna look at that once and they're gonna be like, let me go back to typing on my typewriter. And they were wrong. They were very wrong. And then now they're almost like, it's just,
I mean, you saw that. You saw it when the car came out. You know, it was a new
You
thing.
saw that personally?
Like, I did not see that. But, like, historically, like, the first cars that came out, like, people, like, throw stuff at them and rocks and stuff like that because people want their horses. Like, Henry... Because, like, I mean, because it's a new thing, right? Like, Henry Ford, what's
come here, Seabiscuit.
Like,
let me show this car what for.
Henry Ford's famous quote is, you know, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse, you know? It's like... Because like when you have something that's that radical and new, that the first reactions to it, you know, there's a lot of like negativity and pushback. So I think something so radical. I mean, AI has the potential to be more disruptive than the internet was.
Yeah, no, it has the potential to be Skynet. So that's what we really. The internet was described as Skynet is the end.
Yeah,
but.
So I think finding ways. So Sierra says, I'm not scared of AI. I thought about using it for a project. Felt like I was cheating. So we used the AI. The thumbnail for this video used elements of AI, like the cartoon characters that I had. I use AI. I have a project called Daily Urban Haiku where I take an image that's AI generated, and then I just modify it, and then usually I think of a haiku first, and I get an image to match with the haiku, and then play with the image to just go for an aesthetic I'm looking for, and then use that. On our reels and things like that, the music that you hear in the background, because I don't want to deal with like licensing issues and things like that. Copyright for music is super, super wild to try to navigate legally. So we use AI backing tracks, you know. So I mean, we are a channel that's used elements of AI in our stuff. So I think the way we try to use AI is I try to use it in a way where the AI isn't the centerpiece. Like for instance, for like the haiku series, the haiku is the key thing. The image is just the background for it. The real thing is the haiku. Or like for instance, for like the videos, the music isn't the centerpiece. The music is just like the background stuff, you know. So I wouldn't personally feel comfortable using AI as like the kind of the key element, you know, but complementary elements that can accent what I personally create, I'm okay with that, personally.
That's right. Yeah, I think about the same. I don't think that I think being afraid of it. I think being afraid of something that is inevitable is kind of like if you had watched Back to the Future. Being afraid of time as time is progressing is irrational. Like you should like maybe you have to figure out what to do or how to kind of incorporate or like what. So like if we're talking about we're talking about like cars, right? Or actually no, let's make it further. Like let's talk about like high speed internet, right? So it's like maybe at one time, you know, the way that you might I was watching this show called The Bear, and there's this episode, one of the characters, you watch The Bear?
I haven't. I've heard good things.
Really good show.
About gentrifying a restaurant in a low income neighborhood, right?
Go on.
It's not. That's not it. But anyway, there's this episode in this last season. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen this last season. So like one of the cooks, she's older, and it kind of was like this kind of flashback episode talking about like okay, like when she was younger, how she would apply for jobs. And it was like, but she was like trying to apply for jobs like now, but she was like going places and she was taking her resume. She had the paper resume. She said, "Can you guys put this on file?" And there's like all these, you know, kid like they don't know what she's talking about. Like, what do you mean? Like, put it on file? Like, you mean the computer? And so, or like you mean like the cloud or whatever the situation is or LinkedIn. And so I think like you know, your future was never going to look like you doing the thing that you're doing right now. Forever, right? Like it, like this, because this thing was invented, that would have never worked forever, right? So you have to figure out, like, okay, what is the thing that I do to either bring my vision to life or to keep working in this capacity in a way that's modernized. So, yeah, like you know, fear is not the direction to go, but you know, innovation is the direction to go.
I'm also coming at that though from a position where you know I work for myself. I have my own businesses. There are certainly some jobs that if I had the jobs, I'd be nervous. You know, if I have a job that I feel like AI could replace within the next couple of years, I wouldn't want to live with that sense of like you feel the cord being cut, but you don't know when they're gonna finish cutting it. You know, like I don't feel that being able to have my own job.
There's a lot of aspects of that, like I would say in a field that I used to work in, like in insurance, it's like, you know, there's so much.
Oh my gosh,
there's so much about that process that's like a conversation that you're having with a person that could be just typing something out. That could easily just be, you know, this is a live representative, which is like the AI, your AI representative. It could just be you describing the accident that they're having this conversation back and forth, and then them create like even when it comes to like liability, like deducing liability, it's like so much of that can be deduced from looking at if you have photos of the accident, have a brief description from you, a brief description from that person, like. AI could generate a liability determination. Now, how correct you might say that is or whatever like that, who knows? But it's like,
But they can cut down on their staff because they could cut down on the reps because they just need someone to just oversee and like double check.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like that, all they'd have to do is like kind of jump in, make sure everything is calibrated correctly. But yeah.
All right. Sierra says that she loves the bear.
Great show.
All right, we talked about a lot of things that I wasn't. It was, I had no idea we were going to talk
A little
about.
bit of a ride.
Just to kind of some heads up on some things happening this week as well. Tomorrow we have Lo-Fi Poet at 8:30. So if you want to write to some poems with us, listen to some beats, we'd love to have you. Also, quick note too, we're doing a talk tomorrow with Alexa Patrick from DC. She had a book launch. She's going to be talking about a unique way that she launched her book that maybe you can consider for yourself or poetry projects, just to kind of generate interest and think about ways to creatively bring your work into the world. Okay. Oh, on Friday we have our open mic at Throwaway Cafe.
Yeah.
Sarah's bringing Morgan. That's exciting. Morgan lives like super far away, so we appreciate Morgan coming through. Thursday. So Thursday's the holiday. I would like to do our headshot poet recording, but I may need to find a different spot. We are tentative still at Roosevelt, but I think there's a pretty decent chance that Roosevelt might be closed. So what we may do, I'll keep you guys posted. If you're interested in getting a free headshot or if you're recording yourself reading a poem, keep an eye out on our Instagram and on our Facebook page because I'll be posting updates there. Anything else? I think that's it.
No.
All right.
I'm good.
Cool. Sarah, thanks for hanging out with us. Always good to see you. Hope to see you on Friday. And thanks to you guys for watching. Once more, my name is Jeff.
I'm Matthias.
You've been watching Diverses Live. We'll be back next Tuesday with another episode. You guys take care. Have a good day. Have a good night and a good afternoon.